Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Sicorsi,
And I'm Justin Foster.
and welcome to Synthesis. Synthesis is a Root and River hosted podcast that interviews nonconformist leaders whose ideas help the world be shaped differently and helps shape our vision of the world in a new and different way. And this is our 10th episode, and we're very excited to have author and business amazing humanitarian kind of combo pack of delicious impact on the world, Justin Zoradi with us. And Justin can kind of take it away from there and tell us about Justin Z. There's two Justins today. Don't get confused.
The first time we've done that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So Justin, welcome. Justin, just for you those of you watching and listening to this, I met Justin through another friend, Kenton Lee. Kenton is a friend and client kind of in my pre-Root and River days from Boise, who's gone on to do some major social impact stuff with something called the Shoe That Grows and now other products. And he had randomly posted, or I saw on my Facebook feed, a picture of him holding your book, Justin. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that dude seems interesting when I went and looked, because I didn't recognize your name. And the result of that is, thank you for sending these. And the visit today is with you, but it's also about the book and what it means. Yeah. And so just a little bio is that Justin is the founder of These Numbers Have Faces, which is a social enterprise that is investing in the next generation of African leaders, and is also the president of Giving Fuel, which is a platform which empowers organizations to do better fundraising. And Justin and his wife and 2 children live in Portland, Oregon. So welcome.
Right. Great intro. Thank you, guys. I'm so excited to chat today. It's going to be great.
You bet.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. So, Justin, we usually start out by asking, we like to go way back. We like to turn back the dial because we find that there's a lot in the early days of you that impacts you today and shapes, your sense of the world, your paradigm. So we like to ask, what is sort of the one memory of your childhood that is stayed with you? And it can be just a snippet or something that you remember specifically from childhood that has been a lasting memory for you.
That's a great question. There was something that my mom used to do every Friday night. It probably started when I was about 8 or 9. And what my mom would do is that we would have dinner as a family, and she would pull out the Los Angeles Times and then our local paper. And then she would require us as children to listen to her tell us about whatever is happening around the world. So she would be leafing through it like, okay, this is happening locally. So-and-so has been elected to this seat. And then this is happening in Baghdad. And this is happening in El Salvador. And this is happening in Washington, D.C. And as a 10-year-old, I hated this. I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world, right? I felt like I was in school again, right? And yet it was these tiny little things that my mom would do that opened up my eyes and my brother Ryan to a world just outside of our own little world, our own little school, our own tiny little town. And now I look back on that with so much gratefulness and thankfulness that even though I didn't like it at the time, she was sort of like lighting a spark in me that there's just more to this life than maybe what you think. So that's kind of a important lasting memory for me.
I love that. I'm a former journalist, so obviously I love that idea. But as a kid too, I remember my grandfather that was his first thing of the day when we would stay with him in Ohio. Growing up, we'd spend summers there, and when he got up, he sat down, he read read the local newspaper, the Plain Dealer, and then he read the Wall Street Journal, and he read it cover to cover. And then once he was done, then you could talk to him or hang out. But before that, it was all off limits. So I love that. It sparked obviously your curiosity or your awareness of the world, it sounds like, which is really interesting. And it kind of informs some of the stories and the travels and the work that you've done in the world. That's in the book. So cool.
Totally.
What a gift from your mom to do that, even if you didn't like it to start with,
I know. It's totally true.
So staying in your kind of childhood and some of this comes from you visiting with you and getting to and reading your book, is do you recall a moment or a situation where you realized that the system that had been given to you wasn't going to work for you? It could be around, education, politics, religion, whatever, like some sort of like, here, Justin, do this. And you're like, this isn't for me.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think I was really fortunate to have parents that were always really about me doing what I wanted to do, and really about building a great relationship and trusting me to go out and do things that matter in some way. I know that my family was a little bit concerned when I started maybe going to countries that were maybe dangerous or something like that, be it Belfast, Northern Ireland, or Rwanda, or Zimbabwe, or South Africa, or things like that. I think there was a bit of a pushback of like, ooh, is this the right thing? But no, there were always, I think, systems built where my family were really excited about me doing something like that. So it was probably, I think, originally like maybe around safety. I think though that there was definitely the mentality I think a lot of young people face of, should I just stay here and be comfortable in the little town where I grew up, where things are easy. And so there's always the push to just keep it simple, and don't rock the boat too much. But I think politically, culturally, socially, I was just fortunate to have parents that saw the world in a larger way. Really, my mom kind of driven then through my dad kind of to me. So I didn't face some oppressive thing to kind of fight through that. And funny enough, I remember as a kid, we left this church that I loved. I think I was probably 13 or 14. We left this church that I loved because they wouldn't let my mom become a deacon in the church based on certain rules around her being a woman. And I was bummed because they had a great like youth program, and it was like all my friends were there. But she was like, no, like we need to leave this place because of this and this and this. And and that's sort of always been there. And so it just really shows that the seeds that are planted as parents, and now being a parent myself, into your kids, that stuff matters. Even tiny little things, and I think what you learned a lot in the book as you read is about just like mustard seed type of small actions over time that we don't think impact us, but they totally do. And so I feel like I'm fortunate to not face a whole lot of resistance in some ways when it came to this stuff, but also learned a lot along the way there for sure.
So that's super interesting, because I think you didn't face a lot of resistance, and you had a lot of support, it sounds like, in your family of origin, a lot of nurturing and also great role modeling, right? But then you put yourself in circumstances where the resistance, be it in Northern Ireland or in Africa, was immense. And even just our own resistance. I've lived abroad as well a few times. And in those moments where you are the outsider and you are not maybe keeping even like the same schedule, like you talk about, everybody's gone for the holidays and you're there in Northern Ireland. Like what do you do? Like when you're an expat, you're living in a different way and you're facing resistance. So I think it's hard. I found it difficult to, I struggled in those moments to feel grounded in myself and keep going. Keep living. So, and I know it sounds like from reading the book, it felt like you were in a similar place, but can you talk a little bit about those moments when you had to dig in and continue moving forward past resistance, and how you felt like you dealt with that?
Gosh, I mean, I think that resistance is this real force that I spoke about in the book, and that we probably all read Stephen Pressfield's work about this. And resistance being this force that I think is constantly trying to keep us soft and small and not stepping out and not taking risks. And there's so many little ways that it manifests itself. And so I remember back in high school, even feeling, I kind of was a part of a group that were like partying and doing all the rest. And I remember having this sense one night at some party, like, there's more to life than this. There's more to life than this. And just being kind of sitting on this grass lawn, like there's just got to be more than this, even though I was feeling sucked into whatever was happening around me. And then well beyond that, then going and starting my organization, These Numbers Have Faces, constantly battling through resistance of being, unsure. Are we going to raise enough money? Is the impact going to work? Are our programs going to work? And just all that weight kind of carried on me, constantly. That has been, I would say, really the hardest part of my career is battling through that battling through these times where you just don't feel good enough or smart enough or connected enough or as part of it. And so what I wrote about in the book as well is this concept around resistance, which is that you have to turn pro, and you have to turn pro. And that turning pro is this mindset where you stand up and fight back, and you actually recognize who the enemy is, and you realize that there is a force that is destined and designed to try and take you down. And when you can build small little ways to fight back, it's so important. So firstly is just naming it for what it is and knowing that this thing is kind of after you. And then second, there's like little things about not taking your job description too seriously, not taking your work so seriously. So many of us bury ourselves by our job descriptions and actually wrap up our own identity into it. Thinking that if I fail doing X, either running a marketing company, running a nonprofit, building whatever company it is, that if I fail, it's actually not just the company, but it is me, and that my heart and soul and mind and body are wrapped into it in one. And this whole identity, gosh, as part of our ventures, it's such an important part of how we build them, but also the key thing that can then spiral and then bring the whole thing down, right? Yeah. And so how we separate identity from that, how we battle fear. I write about in the book, staying stupid, which is about not, in some ways overthinking and just acting because it just is the right thing to do in the right time. And there's just powerful things. There's just tiny little tricks to kind of fight back, because otherwise the work is just too hard. There's just too much darkness in the world. There's too much to battle. There's just too many challenges.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Richard Rohr, talks about the fact that we're kind of split between contemplative life and action, especially if you're a person of faith. And you write about this extensively in the book about kind of walking that seam between the calling and the work related to the calling. Yeah. When you do that, when you operate in the seam of anything, it seems to make us hyper aware of dichotomies and paradoxes. So as you went through your journey, from the moment where you said yes, to quote you from the book, yes, and you began executing, you began listening to that voice, you began doing. What did you learn about yourself that felt like a paradox or a dichotomy, or like there were two Justins, like competing? Johnny Cash used to say, "There's John and there's Johnny, and they fight." That type of thing. What were some of those dichotomies that you found in working in the seam between those things?
It's a great question. I'm someone that's so influenced by what other people think of me. Just like call that out how it is. I think so many of us are, even if we don't want to be. And so I was constantly listening and trying to learn from others as I was starting this work. And there were two main things that I sort of heard about that was a paradox or a dichotomy. Firstly was, I started my organization in like Q1 of 2008, which was exactly when the entire economy imploded, right? And it was like the dumbest idea ever. And I had really smart people that I loved and cared about and who loved me saying, "Justin, dude, this is a bad idea, man. Like, you should not try and start an organization that is also about the charity of others to fund the thing right now. This is a bad idea." So I would hear that a lot. And that was a real paradox about my own passion and then just common sense, practical reality, right? And then also with that, being a young person, there's this whole battle too about should you go into the marketplace and make a lot of money, and then when you do that, then do good with it after that, and follow that typical philanthropist model or what you see on TV or whatever else, versus doing it the opposite. And I actually chose to do it the opposite and faced a ton of battles and actually doing that of how do I have a job and actually make money and pay my rent and all the rest. Now, I was fortunate to be 25 and not married, and I didn't have kids, so it was kind of the time for it. But there's a huge paradox there too about when you want to do good in the world, which way should you go? Should you do it from a position of power once you've made it, and that you actually have resources to actually do something on a large macro scale, or should you grind it from nothing and do it as DIY as possible, as I was doing running this little org out of my attic and out of a storage unit and in some abandoned building, and and all the rest. And so there are kind of two ways to do it, but those I think were two major paradoxes that I battled, going forward.
Interesting. It's so interesting too, like you talk about in the book, living in not great areas and like just sort of being there to serve the people and finding community within these environments and finding support in these communities. And so can you talk a little bit about, like, I think today a lot of something that we struggle with a lot and what we'll continue to struggle with as the digital world becomes more and more robust is like true community and connection, and how, the role that plays in our life, and then also like the digital world. So can you talk a little bit about how you continue to see that evolve for you, and the importance of like actual community, and then the digital aspect?
The digital stuff. It's fascinating. I think, from a business perspective, we're so fortunate to live in the times that we are in when it comes to mass communication and the internet and all the rest. And so many of my relationships, take place over WhatsApp, sending messages back and forth to Africa and all the rest. Yeah. I've become really tight with a guy named Ahmed in Pakistan who I hired on Fiverr to do some pitch decks for me for like $25. And now we've become friends outside of that. And he's like, come and see me when you're in Abu Dhabi, because now I work there and I'm doing this and this. And like, we've actually become friends. And there's something really powerful about that from a business perspective. And then again, we are so fortunate. It's the whole, the world is flat mentality. And yet I think there's a massive dark side to it. And there's huge danger in it. And I read about it in the book a lot, this huge paradox of being so connected online and then so lonely and destroyed in your real life. And that the biggest challenge I think now is actually for young people who don't know life before the ubiquitous takeover of the internet. And there's so much research out there of young people that are frankly suffering massive mental health crises because they're just on Instagram all day, and what that does to them, and the void of real human relationships in the way that they were intended, that create empathy and connection and actually fire neurons in our brain and release serotonin, and the whole like science of it too, about when you actually connect someone or touch someone. And so I think for us as leaders in this space, and who can also remember what it was like not having a phone attached to you at all times, we have a real important calling, I think, of how we navigate this thing, and what role does technology play in the next 50 years? Frankly, I think we'll sort of define our species even. It's like that serious,
I agree.
And so I think that it's how we leverage it in business, to grow a movement, to grow a brand, to raise money, to move macro things forward is great. And at the same time, knowing how and when to turn off that phone and connect with the person in front of you. There was an article that I wrote about in the book from the Atlantic that young people nowadays are drinking less, driving less, having less sex, getting less car accidents, less STDs, less pregnancies, and it all looks great. Like, oh my gosh, we are evolving and kids are safe and all the rest. But that's because they are sitting at home in their rooms on their phone.
Yeah. So
of course they're not out there. And yes, it's great. They're not like drinking and driving, but goodness, like what are we losing at the same time? So it's a massive issue for us that I think that we will have to really navigate.
Yeah. And here you are connecting the world through your work. And, one community can help another community when, we are able to use that digital connection. But at the same time, I think sometimes on this side of the world where you're like, oh yeah, I'll donate to that, but you're not connected to the actual problem on a human level. On an everyday level. I think it's an interesting place, and I completely agree with you, like the future of the species. And it sounds like crazy and big, but I believe that's really true. So I'm glad there are young leaders like you that are like bringing that up, writing about that, talking about that, because you represent who these digital natives will be looking towards for guidance around this in the future, today and in the future.
Yeah. So. They're going to listen to you before they listen to us. And so I think you're spot on. So switching to this idea or digging into this idea of mission.
Yeah.
One of the things that appealed the most when I started learning about you, and then certainly while reading the book, is mission is at the center of what we do. One of our many mantras at Root and River is your mission is your brand. Because a brand, in our definition of a brand, is how other people experience what you believe. It's really got nothing to do with your business model or your product or service. It's that. So if someone is going to start to listen to that voice or notice the signs that it's time to do something different and life is more than this, that essentially someone that's having this is maybe in that early stages of awakening, sort of the sleepy-eyed, they're waking up and they're starting to realize, hey, this isn't right. What are some tips, other than reading your book directly, what are some tips that you can give someone that's kind of in that sleepy-eyed state that is just beginning to understand that they're called to something bigger than, the proverbial American dream?
Yeah, I love that. It's funny, we as humans, at least I've found this in my life, you go through times during your day or times during your week or month when you're switched on to stuff that is just bigger than you, and then times where you're totally not, and you're tired, things are hard at work, your kids are annoying, whatever you were going through, and then you kind of shrink back into just regular life and just surviving today, right? Mm-hmm. But there are these moments that I kind of get them at certain times when you're driving in your car and like the right song comes on and like the breeze is the right way through your car, and suddenly you're like, damn, and you have this like moment. Or when I'm walking home at night by myself outside, certain things kind of hit, and you can almost sense, be it God sort of speaking to you or the universe or whatever it is, at certain moments, just kind of leading you forward. And I think that what I'd really encourage people is that when they feel those initial moments, it's to document it in some way, shape, or form. Like record something on your phone, write it in your notes on your iPhone, write yourself an email, just like something about how you felt in that weird moment where I just realized that maybe there's something sort of more than the life that I am leading, because the next day you may not feel it anymore, right? Because you're back to whatever reality, And so having that documented is a great start. And then you will see it, or you'll have it saved somewhere, and it may come back to you. And then I think it's about the next step to me is then taking that tiny little thing. It's that business that you're supposed to build. It's the person who you're meant to pursue and marry. It's the concept or idea of the book to write, the thing to create, whatever it is. Then I think it's about just putting a little bit of time toward it. And I love this concept of, don't follow your passion, follow your time. Because time is actually what drives everything. Everyone has passion about something, but it's about who can put a tiny bit of actual minutes and seconds towards something, right? And so my suggestion is always like 30 minutes per day. And if you can just carve out 30 minutes per day to just percolate or work on that, whatever that tiny thing is that maybe you documented a few months prior. And this can be calling someone about it, writing about it, praying about it, reading about it, expressing yourself about it in some way, shape, or form. And that it's about time. So those 30 minutes can layer on top of whatever the next one is. And suddenly it's then now on the weekend, I'm like now thinking about it for 2 hours and 5 hours. And then I'm going to change my weekly routine around having a whole day committed to building my new podcast or my new art project or whatever it is. Because again, it's all about time management. So whether you want to start a business, write a book, it's like, how do you structure that? So those are sort of my first initial kind of lightly kindling tips of how you start something really, really small.
I love that. I love that, Justin. Years ago, when I was a young mom, working full time, feeling so overwhelmed, a lot of family pressures going on, started seeing this therapist. Not the first time I was in therapy, but at this moment, I was like, I needed something. And she's like, spend a half an hour a day on yourself. And I was just like, cool. And it blew my mind. It started, it was the beginning of something. So I think that's such good advice. And I think that's really brilliant. And it's such an actionable thing. And especially too, writing down. Even if you're not sure what you want to focus on, I think those notes that you mentioned would give you like a little map of like, oh, these are some ideas that come to me in those moments of stillness or clarity.
Yeah.
Those are great.
I just want to add, I actually had one last night, And so my daughter was a mess, and she was up so late, and she was like, read me this book and this book and this book. And she wouldn't go to sleep. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to strangle you. Right. And I'm like reading these kids books over and over and over again. And then I had this thought, I was like, what if I'm actually like, what if my next thing is that I should write a kids book, and it should be somehow linked to the work that I do and like what I care about, but then how do you instill that in children? And so I pulled out my phone. I'm like typing out little things like write kids book and make it like this. And you know what? That might be as far as it ever goes. Right. But it was just so important last night that I had this tiny spark of inspiration and just write it down and then just let it move and grow and evolve and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people think you have to do these big things, but it's really these small things. And then just you said, totally. It's like kindling, like a little bit of time is the kindling to see if it goes anywhere, if that becomes a viable force.
Totally.
So we love to come kind of full circle with synthesis. So our definition of synthesis is multiple realities sort of combining to create a higher level of truth. And so for you, what's one higher level of truth, one higher level of understanding that you have found that you'd love to share with us and with our viewers as well?
Yeah. It is that your work is meant to be incomplete. And that you cannot do everything. And we have this mentality as entrepreneurs and builders and creators that the things that we build belong to us, and that it's our job to drive them forever, and that it's our job to control them and put them in this nice little box where it is ours and all the rest, identity wrapped in and the whole bit. And the reality is that our job is to show up every day and create and build and then stop and actually enable others to then pick up where we leave off. And it's so liberating when you finally understand that all the weight that you're carried or that you are carrying on your shoulders about your thing is actually only meant to be yours for a certain season. And then it's actually meant to then be passed on to others, whether you see it or know it or not, believing that someone will take this mantle and then drive it forward. Because otherwise, the weight of our own expectations or ideas will actually crush us. There's just too much there. We just can't accomplish it. There's too much in the day. So actually believing that your work is meant to be incomplete is pure liberation, because it actually frees you to then just build and not take it so damn seriously, right?
Yeah.
And when you can create like that, you are free. And when you're free, then you actually create your best work. And that, I think, is the like wise truth that I've learned as I've allowed a vision and a concept and a company to bury me, frankly, you know. And you read like in the book about me having to leave it behind in order to kind of save myself, and I think frankly save the org as well. So I would say the one truth that I've really learned in the last 10 to 12 years is about your work being incomplete.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That spoke to me personally, and I know it'll speak to everyone in our audience. And the book is so great because it's so real, just like you've been in this conversation. And, you know, I think that you're messy and beautiful and incomplete and complete all at once in the book. So I know that Justin and I both have enjoyed it so much. And how do people get a little taste of you, of these numbers have faces, of the book? Tell us everything.
Sure. So my website is justinzoradi.com, and so I write on there fair amount. I'm launching a video course actually early next year called How to Start a Fire, which is pretty cool. And then the book is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and you can buy it really anywhere. There's an audio version. They, for some reason, made a like CD version, like someone's gonna buy the CD and put it in their car.
Put it in there. Yeah.
Why did you waste money on the CD version anyway?
Why not, man?
Maybe for your the Discman, if you're doing your jogging and you want to have that while you run. So that is if you want. Yep.
Top.
Exactly. And then the org that I started, These Numbers Have Faces, is at thesenumbers.org.
Awesome. I want to tell you too, Justin, that this morning, and again, the serendipity of things is fascinating to me. Like, I hate the phrase "everything happens for a reason." When I hear that, I want to, punch somebody in the neck. But do believe that everything has its own timing. So I met with this guy this morning, a friend referred me to. He just moved to Austin 4 weeks ago. And he said, I just felt like I had to get out. He was from Buffalo, and he's married with a couple kids, and he quit his job and he moved to Austin because he felt like he had to be here.
Wow.
But I don't quite know what to do. I said, well, did that feel like a voice that said you got to leave? He goes, yes. I said, buy this book, because the next step is to figure out why you're here, like here in this moment. And it was interesting he saw that, he felt the weight of the moment in a positive way, that this wasn't just chit chat about resumes and who I knew in Austin, that this was a date with destiny. And so he texted me right before we came on, and he said, I bought the book. So that's the person, now we all could benefit from this, but that person, if you're in that in-between place and you don't know what you're here to do, even if you're not, if you're kind of maybe a skeptical or even a cynical person, is, I think one of the main things your book does is teach people to listen to that voice. So
absolutely.
I love that. It's a great story.
Awesome.
Thank you, man. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. We'll link to Justin's stuff in the show notes. And until we talk again, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.